What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you some reasons why you might not want the Motorola Moto G Play 2023. Now, in general, I don't actually think this is a bad phone, and actually, if you are looking for a more affordable entry-level phone for more basic activities, I do think it really is worth considering. That being said though, like any phone, this one does have some drawbacks, so I'm going to be going over some of my least favorite things about it to give you a better idea of what to expect if you get it. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about it, I will be linking to several other videos about this phone in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories, so definitely check that out too. But with that being said, let's get into it. So my first reason why you might not want the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 is because it doesn't have NFC. Now, in case you don't know what it is, NFC is basically the main technology behind contactless mobile payment services. So if you like to use tap and pay, in order to actually use that feature, you will need a phone with NFC. Unfortunately though, again, this phone doesn't have it. And while on one hand, I'm not really that surprised, considering Motorola is kind of slow about putting NFC in their phones. In fact, the only budget Motorola phone I know of that has NFC is the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2022, which is quite a bit more expensive than this one. Despite this though, it is still kind of disappointing that this phone doesn't have it, because at this point in 2023, we're starting to see more and more affordable phones that have NFC. In fact, I've seen $100 Cricket branded phones that have it, and while of course not every entry-level phone has NFC, it is still a feature that's constantly getting more and more popular. So honestly, in this day and age, having NFC in a smartphone is more or less getting to be an expectation. So just keep in mind, again, if you do like to use tap and pay, then this is probably not going to be the phone for you. My second reason why you might not want the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 is the processor. Now with this phone, we're getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G37 processor. And overall for the performance, it's definitely not a very fast phone. Sure, on one hand for more basic activities and really light use, doing stuff like occasional web browsing, social media use, watching a video every now and then and stuff like that, it will at least get the job done. But again, keep in mind, even for an entry-level phone, the Moto G Play 2023 is really on the slower side. When I first heard about this phone, I was kind of thinking it was going to be a replacement to the Moto G Power 2022, but honestly the Moto G Power is way faster than this, despite not really being that fast of a phone itself. And with the Moto G Play, this is definitely a lot more comparable to something like the Moto G Pure, which really wasn't a fast phone either. So my point here is, if you are looking for something that has decent performance and you're going to be on your phone a good amount, then you're probably going to be a little disappointed here, because again, even for an entry-level phone, this phone really is on the slower side. So definitely keep that in mind. My third reason why you might not want the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 is the software. Now this phone does currently have Android 12, and on one hand, it's not really that bad, considering most phones in this price range at this point at least also have Android 12. And judging by what happened with the Moto G Pure, which is probably the closest Motorola phone to this one, I do imagine this phone is eventually going to get Android 13. But still, at this point, I mean, Android 13 is the latest version of Android. This is a brand new phone. I mean, it has 2023 in the name. So just considering that, I feel like it would have been a lot better for this phone to actually come with Android 13 right out of the box, and then maybe even get an update to Android 14 in the future. But unfortunately, that's not how things went. So just keep in mind, if you do like having the latest version of Android, you are probably going to be disappointed with this phone. My fourth reason why you might not want the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 is because there's no ultra-wide camera. Now for the camera setup here, up front, we're getting a real nice looking hole punch design for the front-facing camera. This camera is 5 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 16 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So on one hand, the camera setup here is decent, especially for more of an entry-level phone. And like I've talked about in a couple other videos, the actual photo quality of the main camera is pretty good for what it is. That being said though, not having an ultra-wide camera in 2023 is pretty disappointing, considering it's such a common feature. So if you are taking a lot of pictures and you want a wider variety of features, especially if you're taking a lot of group photos, pictures of larger buildings or scenery, or maybe a picture of a room, whatever the case may be, whether you're taking lots of pictures in a situation where an ultra-wide camera would be useful, or you just want more camera features in general, keep in mind, unfortunately, this phone again doesn't have an ultra-wide camera. So if you are expecting that feature, you will be disappointed here. Now my fifth reason why you might not want this phone is the storage. With the Moto G Play 2023, unfortunately, we're only getting 32GB of internal storage. And while it does have microSD card expansion, I feel like at this point, 32GB regardless is just not enough. On one hand, it might be acceptable if you're doing pretty much the bare minimum, which I guess is what this phone was designed for anyway. But still, if you have any decent amount of apps, it is going to fill up pretty quickly. I mean, I don't have a whole lot on this phone. This is pretty much it. A couple social media apps, streaming platforms, Uber type things, Amazon, a couple games, and that's pretty much it. But as you can see, I really don't have much space left. And again, I have pretty much the bare minimum. I'm not really a power user or anything. So if you are someone who's downloading lots of apps and games and stuff, then you can probably see how this might be a problem. In fact, for that matter, I didn't even notice this before, but the system itself is taking up 9 gigabytes alone. So even without downloading anything, you're not really getting a whole lot of space here. So in general, if you are more of a heavy user, or maybe you just don't really want to have to worry about space, then keep in mind, in that case, this is not going to be the best phone for you. The sixth reason why you might not want the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 is because it doesn't have stereo audio. Now, in case you don't know what it means, when a phone has stereo audio, when you're doing something like playing music or watching a video, sound comes out of both the main speaker and the earpiece, giving you a much more immersive experience. But unfortunately with the Moto G Play, this phone again does not have stereo audio, so when you're doing that stuff, sound is only going to come out of the main speaker. Now, on one hand, if you use headphones all the time anyway, or maybe an external speaker, or maybe you just don't really consume a lot of content, in that kind of situation, this is not going to matter, and you might not even notice. But if you are consuming a lot of content, I feel like having a good quality phone speaker definitely does make a difference, and it gives you a bit more flexibility. And honestly, when a phone doesn't have stereo audio, it definitely doesn't sound nearly as good. So in general, if you are consuming a lot of content, especially if you're not always using headphones, then definitely keep this in mind. And finally, my seventh reason why you might not want the Motorola Moto G Play 2023 is because it doesn't have 5G connectivity. Now, on one hand, at this point in 2023, 5G connectivity still isn't really absolutely necessary, but the 5G network, being the latest and greatest network, is really only going to expand from here. So I feel like if you really want to future-proof things, if you're spending the money on a new phone anyway, you might as well get a 5G phone. And even in this price range, going for around $169 at full price, there are still a couple 5G phones out there, like, for example, if you have Metro or T-Mobile, there's always the Revel phones. You can also get a Samsung Galaxy A14 5G unlocked for $199 at the very most, and depending on your carrier, there are plenty of other options out there too, and keep in mind, this is full price, and if you get a carrier deal or something, you can easily get a 5G phone for free. So while on one hand, these really low-end 4G phones still do have their place, I feel like with 5G phones becoming more and more affordable, there's really getting to be less and less of a reason to buy one of these phones instead of a 5G phone that's probably going to be a bit nicer for around the same price, if not maybe a little bit more. So while on one hand, if you're really just looking for something basic that works, this phone is still going to be perfectly fine. If you really are trying to get the most value for the money, then I feel like you can do better. But those were my reasons why you might not want the Motorola Moto G Play 2023. In general, despite some drawbacks, I do still think this is a pretty decent device, and depending on what you're looking for, it could definitely still be worth considering. Now, once again, if you do want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next one.